Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Leadership Void Podcast. I'm Enrique with my co-host Vince to bring you the best in our veteran, military spouse, and first responder community. And Vince will introduce today's guest.
Yes, Enrique, going strong here in September. We have Brian Carrington. He is the CEO and founder of Stone Gryphon Tactical LLC from Southern California. Welcome to the show, Brian. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hey guys, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and thanks for the opportunity. Tell you the truth, I'm a veteran entrepreneur. I was in the U.S. military for about 10 years, U.S. Army and Army National Guard. After I got out of the Army, I joined the police department here in Southern California, and I've been doing that for about 15 years or so. And I started my company, Stone Gryphon Tactical, because I noticed there was a lack in our capabilities as first responders. And typically it's those metal screen security doors that we always run into out in the field. It's basically when you're a police officer, you get those, check the welfare kind of calls, you go to help that person and they have that door and we can't get through them. Usually we have to call for the fire department or, the light to come with their heavy duty breaching tools and break open the door. And, having that happen to me several times where, somebody on the other side of this door is waiting for my help and desperately needs it. And having to wait, 10, 15 minutes on top of that, my normal response time to get to help that person, it's a gut wrenching feeling. And so the idea was I designed a entry tool for first responders, everyday heroes, all those people out there that need a tool, just to bridge that gap in capabilities. So, started coming up with a prototype, made a design, call it the CTAX. It's a nice little compact rescue entry axe for first responders, but also, everyday heroes. You keep it in the back of your car, you roll up on that traffic accident that happens so often. And the idea is just to save lives when seconds count.
That's amazing. There's a lot of education that goes on both in the military and first responder community to save lives. And that looks like a wonderful tool. So tell us a little bit more about Stone Gryphon Tactical.
So, like I said, I came up with the idea. I needed the tool, started looking what was out there, and the fire department has their purpose-built tools that they've been using for several hundred years or 100 years or so, and it's great. But unfortunately, they're really expensive. They're really heavy, and you require some specialized training to do it. And often it takes two people to use one of them. So the idea was to get a company and have something smaller, lightweight, easier to use that first responders and cops can just grab out of the back of their car and save that life. Came up with the prototype idea, ran it by a couple of my, some of my old Army buddies, some of my, the Navy SEAL guys that are out here in Southern California, ran it by some officers and some fire guys, and came up with a design and basically marketed it because I needed the tool. It was a need, and it was an interesting phenomenon when I started the process, talking to officers about that kind of scenario where you had to wait for the fire department, because on average it takes us 6 to 8 minutes to get to a call depending on our response time, and then we call for those additional tools, and you're talking 10, 15 minutes for those to arrive. So you're talking 20 minutes. Somebody needs help. 2 minutes, being in the military, we all know, time and seconds count, and having to wait 20 minutes for something to get that tool to help that person it was unacceptable to me. And many of my coworkers, almost every cop I've talked to, basically had a very similar story. It's like, oh yeah, I had to do that once or twice, or that happened to me last week, or those kind of situations. And I thought that was unacceptable. So the idea was to just make a tool and get it out there to, like I said, try and save lives.
You are saving lives, Brian. So thank you for being creative and addressing that pain point. That capability does save time and saves lives. So we appreciate what you're doing. So let's talk about entrepreneurship a little bit. Curious how long you started your company and what challenges or lessons learned that you have encountered that you have since you ran your company or running your company.
So one of the biggest ones is where to start. I mean, I had this great prototype idea, made one, manufacturing. There's a whole bunch of things that, we all know comes with starting a company. One of the first things is where to start. One of the greatest things I bumped into was a gentleman I bumped into. His name's Mike Hayden. He started a veteran entrepreneur program at a Rady School of Business here in Southern California. And then once you get plugged into the veteran entrepreneur community, there's so many incubator groups and other resources for veterans starting programs. It's really amazing. So one of the biggest lessons I learned was there's a ton of support out there. Not a lot of guys know about it, unfortunately. And once we get the word out there, once you start getting into that program, there's just an abundance of resources for people to help you. One of the bigger programs I got into was Bunker Labs. They really helped out with their entrepreneur program. They're a great organization for veterans, spouses, and female veterans. There's the Rosie Network, which is also here in Southern California, a very powerful, great organization if you have an idea. That was the biggest takeaway that I thought was the neatest to learn about, was all the people that are willing to go above and beyond to help you start your adventure and start getting this entrepreneur spirit going.
A lot of great organizations out there in Southern California. Vince and I are well aware of those two and the great things they do for the veteran community. You mentioned creating this tool out of necessity. It's meeting your need, and it looks like it's something that's catching the eyes of folks. So what's on the horizon for Stone Gryphon Tactical?
Expanding our business, customer base, unfortunately with Instagram and Facebook and some of the other social media programs, there was a lot of censorship. Unfortunately, it is an intimidating looking tool, and I am a police officer. And the current political environment, I was actually getting a lot of censorship from those platforms saying, "Oh, you're marketing a weapon," or those kind of things. It was difficult to overcome because those are the major marketing platforms these days. All the people buying things, those are the ones that people usually use. So that has been the biggest challenge for me, is trying to get over that hump of censorship, basically, and trying to find the workarounds to get that done. So working through, like gun shows were a big, going to like trade conventions and things like that, going to, specialty conventions like the training conventions and things like that, and getting into those spaces has helped out a lot. But social media marketing has been difficult.
Wow, that's interesting. Never thought of that, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. And those listening in who definitely want to understand more, they'll contact you at the very end, know how to do though. So,
Yeah.
And also there's great veteran organizations and great veteran entrepreneurs that can help diversify your customer base. So we'll stay tuned after the show, talk about that. Let's transition a little bit, Brian, talk about leadership. No pun intended here. What do you do to sharpen your skill sets to aid you to thrive in your professional life?
Professional life as a police officer, going to a lot of the training conferences that are out there. There's a lot of police leadership organizations that are starting to crop up. They've recognized that there's a drastic need for it in these days, especially with the higher turnover and so many officers retiring. You're getting a very large gap in the middle of police departments. You get the super new guys that have been on for a few years. Then you have the super guys that are been on the department for 15 or 20 or more, because they are committed to their organization. So there's a big gap for people in the middle. I think one of the bigger things to do is start going to some of the leadership courses offered by some of the colleges. They started to recognize the need for that. I've started taking some of those classes, and then there's other classes that are provided to by the federal government. They're part of the UASI grant system. It's the federal grant system that have been really well received, and I think are really powerful resources for people trying to become leaders, and providing that mentorship role to the newer people. As one of the things I think is very important too, is to bring those new people that have only been on the department for a year or so, to say, hey, this is the way things are, and we need to to fill that gap of leaders.
And bringing those that are brand new into the fold and into newer waters is one of the things that we do as leaders. And talking about specifically that, as you have experience in the Army, the National Guard there, and now the police force, what advice did you receive that you would like to pass on to an emerging leader today?
Never stop learning, I think, is probably one of the better ones. But I think the other thing was that if you notice that something's going on and you notice there's bad leadership, I think one of the more poignant lessons I learned in the Army was what to look for in a good leader. You want that guy that cares about his troops, that knows things about them, shows general interest in his people, and tries to make their lives better. One of the things was basically train your subordinates to do your job for you, so they know how to do your job, how to grow, and push them into those new leadership roles. Not just because you're not trying to delegate all your authority, but you're trying to push them to be the leaders that you want to see in the organization. And if they can do your job, and you train them up to that level that they basically go and be those leaders, you're helping your organization. Not only does it make your job easier because your people know what they're doing, but it helps the organization as a whole because you're creating better leaders. Basically looking at the people, especially in the Army and in the police department, looking at the things I saw in leaders that I didn't like, and making a conscious decision to not repeat the mistakes I saw other leaders making, and to do better.
Absolutely. You can learn a lot from good and bad leaders, how to mentor them, how to mentor the young troops, and also empower, as you mentioned, them to, fill that position, because we are going to either leave or move up. So that someone has to fill that for the team. Love hearing that. So the 10 years you had in the military or the police force, what memorable leadership aha moment have you had that you'd like to share with our audience today?
That aha moment, like I said, was the try to mentor the people underneath you. There's so much turnover going on, even in the Army. I think at the same time, there's so much turnover going on that you need to focus on being that good leader, bringing those people up and mentoring the newer people. I had a trainee that I was working with, and a newer guy on the department, and just showing him the ropes was part of the job. But a lot of people wouldn't do that. There's so much, I think there's a lack of communication, I think, with some of the newer people coming on, that people just don't like to talk about things. So just sitting down and saying, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I think is a good thing to do, and working with people to try and become those better leaders.
Now, Brian, you mentioned earlier the challenges in social media and some of the censorship that happens there. And those obviously are some struggles. But what are certain strategies you use with your team to deal with these times of challenges?
Basically trying to find those other avenues of those other organizations and things like that. So if I'm getting censored, I can't run ads or I can't boost posts, reaching out to those other organizations, other resources. So there's the First Responder Whiskey Society. That's been a pretty powerful thing on Facebook and Instagram, reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're all kind of in the same boat here. We're all kind of in that demographic that people aren't super happy to be with right now, but trying to help each other. That has been one of the better things, is just reaching out for help and finding it. Then the surprising amount of people that will make those connections and help you out.
Oh, absolutely. Make those connections, help out. Talk about help out, make these connections. How do we get a hold of you, Brian, or Stone Gryphon Tactical?
You can check out our website, Stone Gryphon Tactical. We've been on there for a while. Also on Instagram and Facebook as Stone Gryphon Tactical, and I'm always on LinkedIn as Brian Carrington.
Outstanding. Now, we're going to have all that information as part of the show notes and video for you to get a hold of Brian and his company. If you want to get a hold of us at the Leadership Void Podcast, at theleadershipvoid@gmail.com. And that's where you'll send that correspondence. If you want to hear a specific leadership topic covered or a guest featured, please let us know by those means.
Absolutely. And Stone Gryphon Tactical, folks, you heard it here first. We hope everything works out for you. We have great sponsors that might be able to help you flourish as well. They are FAVOB, Triple Nickel, and VEI. But, today is all about Brian Carrington. Thank you for your time, and we wish you much success.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.